Amara was known throughout the small village of Enugu for her beauty and proud nature. Her skin glowed like the early morning sun, and her eyes were bright and full of life. Every young man in the village admired her, but none could win her heart. When suitors came to her mother's home with gifts of palm wine, yams, and fine cloth, Amara always found a reason to turn them away. She would smile politely and say, "I thank you for your kindness, but my heart does not agree." Her mother, Mama Ifioma, often sighed in worry. "My daughter," she would say, "beauty does not last forever. One day you will want a husband and none will come." But Amara only laughed softly. "Mama, I will marry only when I meet someone whose heart speaks to mine." The villagers began to talk about her. Some said she was too proud, while others believed she waited for true love. Still, Amara remained firm in her choice. She worked hard on her small farm, selling cassava and plantains in the market. Though she was young and unmarried, she carried herself with strength and grace. One calm evening, the full moon shone over the village. The air was cool and the crickets sang softly in the grass. Amara was walking home from the river with a clay pot balanced on her head when she saw a figure standing near the path. At first, she felt frightened, but as she came closer, the man stepped into the light. He was tall and handsome, with calm eyes that seemed to look straight into her soul. His clothes were simple, yet there was something unusual about him, something that made her heart beat faster. "Good evening," he said in a deep, gentle voice. Amara nodded shyly. "Good evening, stranger." The man smiled. "My name is Obinna. I have just arrived in this village. I am looking for a place to stay. Could you tell me where I might find the elder's home?" Amara pointed toward the far end of the road. "Follow that path until you see a large mango tree. The elder's hut is beside it." Obinna thanked her with a slight bow. But before he left, he said something that made her pause. "You should be careful walking alone at night, Amara." Her eyes widened. "How do you know my name?" she asked. He smiled again, but this time there was a strange calmness in his face. "Names are carried by the wind," he said softly. "And the wind tells me things." Then he turned and walked away. Amara stood still, her heart racing. How could he know her name? She had never seen him before. The wind blew gently, and she felt a chill even though the night was warm. When she got home, Mama Ifioma noticed her quiet face. "My child," she said, "what troubles you?" Amara shook her head. "Nothing, Mama. I only met a stranger on my way home." Her mother frowned. "A stranger? You must be careful. The world is full of mysteries." That night, Amara lay awake on her mat, thinking about the man called Obinna. His voice echoed in her mind, calm and deep. His eyes had not looked at her the way other men's eyes did. There was kindness, but also something she could not explain, something that made her feel both safe and uneasy. The next morning, she went to the market to sell her vegetables. As she arranged her goods, she looked up and froze. Obinna stood across the market, talking to the elder's son. He looked clean and strong in the sunlight, and when his eyes met hers, he smiled. Amara quickly looked away, her cheeks burning. For the next few days she saw him often. He helped the villagers repair the broken fence near the stream, fetched water for the old women, and carried heavy firewood for those who needed it. Everyone began to like him. "That new man is different," they said. "He is humble and kind." One afternoon, as Amara washed clothes by the river, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned and saw Obinna again. "Do you always work this hard?" he asked. Amara smiled faintly. "Someone must do the work. The river waits for no one." He laughed quietly. "You speak with wisdom." Then, after a moment of silence, he said, "You have a strong heart, Amara. Many women would not live alone and work like this." She looked at him curiously. "How do you know so much about me?" He looked down at the water, his face thoughtful. "Sometimes the heart tells us more than words." They spoke for a long time that day. Amara felt something new, something soft and warm growing inside her chest. She tried to fight it, but each time she saw him, her heart felt lighter. He never told her much about where he came from. He only said he had traveled far and had no family left. Days turned into weeks. Obinna began visiting Amara's home, helping her mother fix the broken roof and carrying water from the well. Mama Ifioma liked him. "This man is humble," she said. "Perhaps your heart has found what it was waiting for." Amara did not answer, but her eyes said everything. One evening, under the same moon where they first met, Obinna came to see her. He stood quietly beside her hut as the wind rustled the trees. "Amara," he said, "I have known peace since the day I met you. You are not like others. Your heart is pure." Her hands trembled slightly. Why do you say such things? Because it is true, he replied. I have wandered for a long time, searching for someone who could see beyond what the eyes can see. And you did. Amara felt her heart beating faster. She could not explain it, but she felt drawn to him as though they were connected by something older than time. He reached out and gently touched her hand. Will you be mine? He asked softly. For the first time in her life, Amara could not speak. She only nodded. And as the wind blew through the trees, she felt an invisible warmth wrap around her. But deep in her heart, a quiet voice whispered, a warning she could not understand. Obinna smiled and said, Then our journey begins. That night, as the moon glowed over Enugu, the villagers slept peacefully, unaware that a love both beautiful and mysterious had begun. A love that would soon reveal secrets far beyond what Amara ever imagined. Amara's days began to feel like a dream. The man who had once appeared out of nowhere was now her husband. Obinna treated her with tenderness and spoke to her with respect. His every word felt like poetry, his every glance filled her with warmth. The whole village talked about their sudden marriage. Some were surprised, others were jealous, but Amara did not care. She finally felt that her heart had found peace. The wedding had been simple but magical. It took place near the old river shrine, where the air smelled of wet earth and incense. The drummers played softly as the priest blessed their union. Amara wore a white wrapper and beads around her neck, while Obinna dressed in clean traditional cloth with a red cap. When they exchanged vows, Amara looked into his eyes and saw both love and something she could not name. An old sadness, perhaps, or a secret too heavy for words. After the wedding, Obinna led her to his home at the edge of the forest. The house was small but beautiful, surrounded by tall trees and mist that never seemed to clear completely. Birds sang in the morning, and at night, the air was filled with the soft hum of crickets. Amara loved the peace of it, far from the noise of the village. Obinna was a good husband. He always made sure she had everything she needed. He cooked with her, helped her in the garden, and told her stories by the fire. But one thing about him was strange. Every night, just before midnight, he would quietly leave the house. He never said where he went, only that he had things to take care of. At first, Amara didn't question him. She trusted him. But as days turned into weeks, her curiosity began to grow. Each time she asked where he went, he would smile gently and say, My love, do not worry. It is better if you stay inside after midnight. Promise me you will never go out then. She would nod, though her mind was full of questions. Why did he always return just before dawn? Why did the air around their home feel colder at night? Sometimes while lying awake she heard soft footsteps outside the hut, light, slow and careful. Other times it sounded like whispers floating in the wind. One night she heard what sounded like people singing softly, their voices distant but haunting. She sat up on the bed, her heart beating fast. She wanted to look outside but remembered his warning. So she covered her ears and tried to sleep, though the whispers echoed in her dreams. In the morning when Obinna returned, his face looked pale and tired. She asked him if he was ill, but he only smiled and said, The night has many secrets, my dear. Some are not meant to be known. Then he changed the subject and gave her fruits from the forest, saying they would bring her strength. The next few days passed quietly. Amara tried to ignore her worries, but deep down she knew something was not right. The villagers rarely came to visit her anymore. When she went to the market, people whispered behind her back. One old woman stopped her and said in a low voice, Child, do you still live near the forest? You should not. That place is not for the living. Amara frowned. What do you mean, Mama? But the old woman only shook her head and walked away. That night, Amara couldn't sleep. The wind outside was strong and she could hear the trees swaying. When Obinna left as usual, she sat by the fire, staring at the door. Her mind was filled with questions. Why would he warn her not to go outside? What could be so dangerous? Hours passed and the fire slowly burned out. The silence grew heavy. Then she heard it again, the faint sound of singing. It came from deep within the forest. Her curiosity grew stronger than her fear. She stood up, her heart racing, and slowly pushed open the door. The night was bright with moonlight. Mist covered the ground, and the air was cold against her skin. She wrapped her shawl tightly around her shoulders and stepped outside. The singing grew louder. It was beautiful but strange, like many voices blending into one. She followed the sound through the trees until she reached a small clearing. Her breath caught in her throat. In the middle of the clearing were several people dressed in white, moving in a slow circle. Their faces were calm but pale, and their bodies seemed to shimmer in the moonlight. And there, among them, was Obinna. Amara froze. He was standing in the center, his eyes closed, his feet barely touching the ground. The people around him were not dancing, they were floating. The realization hit her like cold water. These were not living people. They were spirits. She gasped softly, but the sound seemed to echo. Obinna's eyes opened instantly and he turned toward her. The circle stopped. The spirits faded slowly into the mist until only he remained. "Amara," he said quietly, his voice both sad and gentle. "Why did you come?" Tears filled her eyes. "Obinna, what is this? Who are you?" He walked closer, his face calm but full of pain. "I told you never to come outside after midnight. Now you have seen what you were not meant to see." Her hands trembled. "Tell me the truth," she whispered. He looked at her for a long time. "I am not like you, Amara. I am a spirit bound to this forest. Long ago I was a man who died here unjustly. My soul could not find peace, so I remained. When I met you I felt alive again. For the first time I wanted to live." Amara's heart ached. The man she loved, the one she had married, was not of this world. She stepped back, tears running down her cheeks. "I love you," she said softly, "but you should have told me." He smiled sadly. "Would you have stayed if I did?" She didn't answer. The night wind blew between them, carrying the sound of the river. For a long time they stood there, two souls caught between love and the truth that could not be changed. Obinna reached out and touched her hand. His skin was cold, but his touch was gentle. "Go home, my love," he whispered. "You still belong to the living. Do not let my world take you." Then before her eyes, his body began to fade into mist. "Obinna," she cried, reaching out, but her hands met only the cold air. The singing started again, fading into the distance. Amara stood alone under the moon, her heart breaking. She ran back home, clutching her chest as tears fell down her face. When the first light of dawn came, she sat by the fire, staring into the flames. The night had stolen something from her, but it had also given her a truth she would never forget. And deep inside her heart, she knew that her love story was far from over. That night, the moon was full and white like a pearl, hanging high above the quiet village. Amara sat by the fire, trying to calm her thoughts. Since she had discovered Obinna's secret, her heart had not known peace. He no longer smiled as before. His eyes were distant, his voice weaker. Sometimes he would stare at the darkness outside as if something was calling him. The forest seemed to change too. The air was always cold now, even when the sun burned hot during the day. Animals no longer came near their home, and sometimes strange marks appeared on the ground near the door, footprints that looked half real, half shadow. Amara tried to stay brave. She cooked, cleaned, and sang softly to keep her spirit strong. But every night she could hear faint whispers outside. They were not clear words, just soft, sorrowful sounds like the wind crying. She told herself it was only her imagination, yet each night the voices grew louder. One evening as she sat alone, she felt something strange in her chest. The fire dimmed and the air turned heavy. She stood up and walked toward the window. The moonlight fell across the forest path. At first she saw nothing, only mist. But then, slowly, shapes began to move in the shadows. At first she thought they were people returning from the river. But when she looked closer, her heart froze. Their bodies were gray and faint like smoke, and their faces were hidden in the mist. They moved without sound, gliding slowly between the trees. Amara's lips trembled. "Who are they?" she whispered. Suddenly, a cold wind blew through the hut, putting out her fire. She gasped and turned around, clutching her wrapper tightly. The singing started again, soft, sad, and full of pain. It came from everywhere and nowhere. The sound rose and fell like waves. Then, from the mist, she saw Obinna running toward the house. His face was pale, his clothes fluttering in the wind. His eyes were wide with fear. "Amara," he shouted. "Go inside." She stood frozen. "Obinna, what is happening? Go inside now." His voice cracked, filled with pain. "Do not look at them." Amara turned and ran into the hut. She shut the door and leaned against it, trembling. The singing grew louder for a few moments, then slowly faded away. The wind stopped. Everything became still again. When she turned around, Obinna was standing inside. He looked weak, almost transparent in the moonlight. His voice was soft when he spoke. "You should not have seen that," he said. Tears filled her eyes. "What are they, Obinna?" He shook his head. "They are the ones who wait for me. My brothers of the night. They were lost souls too. I tried to keep them away, but they come when the moon is full." Amara felt her knees weaken. "Then what will happen to you?" He looked at her with sadness. "I do not know. My time here may be ending." She wanted to touch him, but when she reached out, her hand passed through his arm like mist. She gasped and pulled back. "Please," he said softly. "Stay away from the forest when the moon rises. Promise me." Amara nodded, tears streaming down her face. When morning came, she could no longer stay silent. She left her home and ran to her mother's house in the village. Her heart beat fast as she banged on the door. Mama Ifioma opened it, startled. "Amara, my child, what is wrong?" Amara fell into her mother's arms, shaking. "Mama, I have to tell you something," she said, her voice breaking. They sat by the hearth as Amara told her everything. About Obinna, his secret, the singing voices, the pale shadows in the forest. Her mother listened quietly, her face growing pale. When Amara finished, silence filled the room. Finally, Mama Ifioma said in a trembling voice, "My child, this is not something ordinary. We must go to the village elder. Only he will know what to do." So, they went together to the home of Papa Chinidu, the oldest man in the village. His hair was white like cotton, and his eyes, though dim, were sharp with wisdom. He sat under the shade of a large tree, holding his walking stick carved with old symbols. Amara knelt before him. "Papa, I need your help," she said. He looked at her kindly. "Speak, my daughter." She told him everything again, her voice shaking. Papa Chinidu listened without interrupting. He nodded slowly, his face growing more serious with every word. When she finished, he sighed deeply. "So, you say his name is Obinna?" "Yes, Papa," she whispered. The old man looked into the distance, his eyes clouded with thought. "Obinna?" he repeated softly. "There was a young man by that name, a hunter. He died 3 years ago in the forest." Amara's heart stopped. "No," she said weakly, shaking her head. "That cannot be. My husband is alive. I see him. I touch him. I speak with him." Papa Chinidu looked at her with deep sorrow. "My child, the living cannot live with the dead. If what you say is true, then the man you married is not among the living. His soul may have been trapped between worlds." Amara's hands trembled as tears filled her eyes. "But why me? Why did he come to me?" "Love is a strong thing," the old man said quietly. "Sometimes even death cannot break it. But love from the dead brings danger to the living. If you stay with him, your soul may be pulled into his world." Her mother gasped softly and placed a hand on Amara's shoulder. "We must save you, my child," she said. "You must not return there." But Amara's mind was spinning. She thought of Obinna's gentle voice, his kind eyes, his promise to protect her. Could it all have been a lie? Or was it love trying to live where it no longer belonged? Papa Chinidu leaned closer. "Go home, Amara," he said softly. "But not to that forest. Stay here tonight. Tomorrow I will come with the elders to cleanse the place. If what you saw is true, then his spirit must be set free." Amara nodded slowly, though her heart was breaking. She looked toward the forest, where mist still hung in the air like a ghostly curtain. As night came again, she lay beside her mother, wide awake. She thought of Obinna, his smile, his touch, his sadness. She could almost hear his voice whispering her name through the window. "Amara." Her eyes filled with tears. "Forgive me," she whispered. "Forgive me for loving you." Outside, the wind carried a soft sound through the village, the same sad singing she had heard before, fading into the distance. And deep in the forest, where the mist never lifted, a lone figure stood beneath the moonlight, watching her window. His face was pale, his eyes full of sorrow. He whispered her name once more, then vanished into the night. The morning after her talk with Papa Chinidu felt heavy, like the sky itself carried sorrow. Amara sat outside her mother's hut, staring into the distance, her heart pounding with disbelief. The old man's words echoed in her mind again and again. He died 3 years ago. How could that be? How could the man she had touched, laughed with, and called her husband be a spirit from the other side? She wanted to deny it, to believe it was some kind of mistake. Maybe there was another man named Obinna. Maybe the elder was wrong. But deep inside her, she already knew the truth. His pale skin, his cold touch, the way his eyes sometimes seemed far away, all the strange things she had ignored now made sense. Still, she needed to see it with her own eyes. So that afternoon, Amara went with Papa Chinidu and her mother to the old village graveyard. The path was quiet, the air heavy with the smell of wet earth and old trees. Crows flew overhead, their cries echoing in the silence. The elder led them slowly between the rows of graves, leaning on his stick. "Here," he said softly, pointing toward a corner covered in vines. "This is where he rests." Amara stepped closer, her feet shaking. The grave was old and covered with green moss. She bent down and brushed away the dirt with her trembling hands. Then she saw it. Carved faintly on the stone were the words, "Been and woke, gone too soon." Her breath caught in her throat. The world seemed to spin around her. She fell to her knees, staring at the name. Her heart broke in silence. Everything inside her screamed that it was impossible. Yet the proof was right there in front of her eyes. Her mother knelt beside her, holding her shoulders gently. "My child, you must let him go," she whispered. Tears fell from Amara's eyes, soaking the ground. "Why didn't he tell me?" she whispered. "Why did he come back to me?" Papa Chinedu sighed deeply. "Spirits that return are lost ones," he said. "They wander when something ties them to the living. Sometimes love holds them, sometimes regret." Amara looked at the grave for a long time. The rain started to fall softly, mixing with her tears. She felt as though a part of her heart was being buried all over again. That night, she returned to the house on the edge of the forest. It was quiet, too quiet. The mist hung low and the air was cold. She walked inside, her steps slow and heavy. The lamp still burned faintly in the corner, just as she had left it. Obinna was standing by the window. His face was pale, but his eyes were filled with sadness and love. When he turned to her, she felt the same warmth she had always felt, but now she also felt the chill of sorrow. "I never meant to frighten you," he said softly. His voice sounded tired, like a wind that had been blowing for too long. Amara's lips trembled. "It's true, isn't it?" she whispered. "You're not among the living." He nodded slowly, his eyes lowering. "Yes," he said. "I was once a man like any other. I hunted, I laughed, I dreamed. But my life ended too soon. My spirit could not rest. I wandered for years, lost between this world and the next." Amara took a shaky step forward. "Then why me, Obinna? Why did you come to me?" He smiled gently. "Because when I saw you, I felt something I had forgotten. Peace. You had kindness in your heart even when others showed pride or fear. When I looked at you, I felt alive again. Your love reminded me of what it meant to be human." Tears filled Amara's eyes. "But you deceived me," she said softly. "You let me believe you were alive." He lowered his head. "I did not mean to. I only wanted to feel love one last time before I faded completely. But I stayed too long. The world of the living began to reject me. That is why the shadows came. They came to take me back." Amara's voice broke as she whispered, "Then why did you marry me?" He stepped closer, his hand reaching out to her, though his fingers trembled like smoke. "Because I loved you," he said simply. "And love does not belong only to the living. I wanted to give you my heart, even if it was only for a short time." Amara cried openly now. "But what will happen to you?" Obinna's eyes softened. "I must leave," he said. "The dawn will break soon. The light will call me back to where I belong. My time here is over." "No," she said, her voice desperate. "Please don't leave me again." He smiled sadly. "You have to live, Amara. You must not tie your heart to a spirit. Promise me you'll live for both of us." The first light of morning began to shine through the cracks in the roof. As the golden rays touched him, his body started to fade. The edges of his figure turned to mist, glowing faintly like fireflies. Amara reached out to touch him one last time, but her hand passed through him like air. "Obinna," she cried. He looked at her one last time, his smile soft and peaceful. "Thank you for giving me what death could not, love." And then with the rising sun he was gone. The house fell silent. Only the sound of the morning birds filled the air. Amara stood still, her heart heavy, her eyes full of tears. She looked down and saw something shining on the floor. It was his wedding ring, simple, silver and cold. She picked it up and held it close to her heart. Outside, the sun rose higher, burning away the mist. The forest looked calm again, as if nothing had ever happened. But Amara knew better. She knew she had loved a man not of this world, and that love had changed her forever. That morning she walked back to her mother's house. When Mama Ifioma saw her, she embraced her tightly. "He is gone," Amara whispered. "But he left me something precious." Her mother looked at her with tears in her eyes. "What is that, my child?" Amara placed her hand over her heart. "Peace," she said softly. "He gave me peace." From that day she never returned to the house by the forest. But every morning she wore his ring around her neck and whispered a quiet prayer for the man she had loved, one who had lived beyond life itself. And sometimes when the moon was full she could still feel a gentle breeze brushing her cheek, as if Obinna was there, whispering her name once more. Years passed slowly after that morning when Obinna vanished with the rising sun. The pain of losing him never truly left Amara, But time softened it into something gentler, something almost sacred. She never married again. Many men tried to win her heart, but she always smiled and said softly, "My heart already knows where it belongs." People in the village whispered many things about her. Some said she had lost her mind, others said she was cursed. But those who looked closer saw something different. Amara was no longer the proud maiden she once was. She was calm, wise, and full of quiet strength. Her eyes carried peace as though she had seen beyond the veil of life itself. Near the edge of the forest where she once lived with Obinna, Amara built a small shrine. It was made of wood and clay, with a little altar where candles burned each evening. She called it the House of Peace. Villagers began visiting her there to pray for their loved ones who had passed away. She would listen to their stories, offer a soft prayer, and remind them gently that death was not an end, only a doorway to something unseen. At first, people came out of curiosity. Then they came out of faith. They said the air around her shrine felt different, lighter, as if the souls that wandered restless in the night found comfort there. And sometimes, on quiet evenings, a gentle wind would blow through the trees, making the candles flicker, and the people would say, "Obinna is here, watching over her." Amara herself often sat near the shrine at dusk, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes fixed on the horizon. The golden light of sunset would paint her face, and she would smile faintly, whispering words no one else could hear. It was her way of speaking to him. "You are free now," she would say. "But your memory will never fade." As the years went by, children who had never known her story began to ask their parents about the quiet woman by the forest. And the elders would tell them, "That is Amara, the woman who once married a ghost without knowing it. Her love was pure enough to set his spirit free." People began to see her not as strange but as blessed. Women came to her for advice about love, men came to seek her prayers before marriage, and travelers from far places came just to meet the woman who had loved beyond life and death. Amara welcomed them all with kindness. She never spoke proudly of her story, she only said, "Love is not what you see, it is what you feel when your heart recognizes truth." She taught that pride can blind the eyes, and that real love often comes quietly, without riches, without glory, sometimes even without life itself. Her simple words touched everyone who listened. Though her hair turned gray and her steps grew slower, her spirit stayed bright. Each morning she would light a candle at the shrine and whisper a prayer for wandering souls. Each evening she would walk to the forest edge, place a small white flower by the old path where she once saw Obinna for the first time, and then return home with a soft smile. Some nights, when the moon was high, villagers claimed to see two figures walking near the trees, a woman dressed in white and a tall man beside her. Their forms shimmered faintly, like mist in the moonlight. When people looked closer they would disappear. Those who believed said it was Amara and Obinna, reunited in spirit, walking together as they once did in life. When Amara grew old, the village gathered to celebrate her life. She had become a symbol of love and faith, someone whose story gave hope to others. Even those who had once mocked her came to honor her, bowing their heads with respect. On her last day she sat near the shrine, surrounded by soft candlelight. She looked peaceful, her eyes closed as if she were listening to a voice only she could hear. A gentle wind blew through the forest, carrying the scent of rain and wildflowers. She smiled faintly and whispered, "Obinna, I am ready." When the villagers came the next morning, they found her sitting just as they had left her, her face calm and full of peace. A single white flower rested on her lap, though no one had placed it there. They buried her beside the shrine, and the place became sacred to many. People still visit it to this day, lighting candles and praying for love, forgiveness, and peace. Her story became a legend passed from one generation to another, the tale of a proud maiden whose heart was humbled by love, who married a spirit without knowing, and whose kindness freed a soul trapped between worlds. Even after her death, when the wind rustled the trees near the shrine, people said they could hear soft whispers in the air, two voices, gentle and familiar, speaking to each other like old lovers reunited after a long journey. Amara's lesson lived on. Love is not bound by life or death, beauty or pride, it is bound only by the soul. And somewhere beyond the world of men, Obinna's spirit waited for her, just as he promised, his heart forever tied to hers.